I'm Dan Runde. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm a Senior Vice President here at CSIS, and I lead the Americas Program here. I'm really, really pleased to be hosting my friend, Ambassador Martha Bárcena, who's the Ambassador of Mexico to the United States. I think everyone who knows Ambassador Bárcena and has followed Mexico will say that Ambassador Bárcena has had a very successful stay here in Washington, a very successful mission here in Washington, during some challenging days and also some challenging issues. But I think there have been a number of great successes. This is widely recognized in the diplomatic community. So it's really, really wonderful that Ambassador Bárcena is doing a goodbye conversation with us. It's not goodbye in the sense of goodbye. It's like, Ambassador, I want you to know we're going to be talking, I hope, next week or the week after when you leave. And I know I'm going to put in quotes, air quotes, retirement. I know you're retiring from the Foreign Service after many very successful and productive years in the Mexican Foreign Service, but you've still got a lot of contributing to do. So I'm going to use the term retirement in a very loose sense.
Loose sense, yes.
So thank you. And the last thing I just want to say is I want to congratulate you early on. You had the birth of your second grandchild this week. So I want to offer on behalf of all of CSIS our warmest congratulations to you and your family on this wonderful life moment.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I'm approaching this retirement, quote unquote, as you say, with an attitude that it's just the next stage in which I could continue to contribute to Mexico's to the bilateral relationship from other fora, and I also take the opportunity to give more time to my family. Being a grandmother is great, and it has always been great for everyone. But I think, Dan, that the pandemic has all of us made us thought what is really important in life and how we should prioritize certain moments in your life. And this now, I think it's time to spend. It's a time to spend more time with my family. So I'm happy with this, but I'm sure that we will keep in touch, and not only with you, my dear friend, but with all the friends of Mexico.
Well, let's start, Ambassador. You joined the Foreign Service in 1979. You must have been 10 years old when you started in the Foreign Service.
I was 21.
But you've since served in various capacities, several ambassadorships. Could you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to join the Foreign Service? And could you also, were there a lot of women in the Mexican Foreign Service in 1979?
Well, in my generation, we were 50% women, 50% men. So I think it was one of the first generation. It was equal number. What made me join the Foreign Service is I always had a great interest in international affairs and in history, but I was also a classical ballet dancer, and I wanted to become a dancer, a professional dancer. I was a professional dancer in the Mexican company, national company, but then I started to have a lot of physical problems. So I thought that it was better to rely on my head and not on my head and my body. So I finished university, and since I was a child, my grandfather used to take me to UNAM, and he would show me where did you study political science and diplomacy. And he was the doctor of Jaime Torres Bodet, a great foreign minister of Mexico, a great director general of UNESCO. And he told me, here you studied to become a diplomat like my friend Jaime Torres Bodet. I said, what is a diplomat? I was like 8 years old. Say, you represent your country and you do it well with intelligence as Jaime Torres Bodet. So that remained in my mind. When I joined the university, you know, there have been moments at UNAM in which was there were many strikes. So the calendars of the high schools and UNAM were not compatible. You had to wait like for a year to go into the university. So I went to a private university in Mexico, the Jesuit one, and they didn't have the career of international affairs, of international relations, but they had communication, which I thought it was a very attractive career to study because you had a very broad number of issues that were addressed there. It was in that time, it was more based on humanities and philosophy than on technical issues. And since then, I focus on studying the international aspect of communication, freedom of expression at international level, and you may remember, the young people will not remember, but there was at those times the discussion of the new world economic order, and the non-aligned movement were also speaking about the new world information order in the famous Bandung conference. So I got into study all these matters, and in due time, when the foreign ministry made a call for exams to join the Mexican Foreign Service, then I decided to join, and I passed exams, and I've been there more than 40 years, sometimes taking leave of absences to follow my husband, who is also a career diplomat, retired. And it has been a great experience, and more than an experience, the passion of my life to represent my country, to be able to establish communication bridges. My communication studies never abandoned me, and I never abandoned them. So just keep a lot of attention on empathy, on feedback, on understanding the other, on explaining your position well. And that has been the passion of my life. I will continue to do it from other fora, but that's the story of why I joined the Foreign Service.
Ambassador, you were ambassador to Denmark,
yes,
Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, among other countries, and you were also Mexico's ambassador to the FAO in Rome. So you've had a very storied career.
Yes.
I want to pass over your time in these other countries, but I want to stop for a minute as your time as representative to Mexico and the FAO, because you learned when you were Mexico's representative of the FAO, that you were going to become Mexico's ambassador to the United States. Would you please tell the story you told me at dinner that makes me laugh makes me laugh, please?
Yes, I was based in Rome representing Mexico to FAO, to the World Food Program, which is a fantastic organization, and to IFAD. So I asked my friend, the representative of the Vatican to FAO, to please help me to have a farewell appointment with Pope Francis. And he delivered. He organized that. So I have met Pope Francis twice in FAO, but in a big, big groups. And so I had this private audience for minutes on a Wednesday. And I say, Your Holiness, I'm coming to say goodbye and to seek your benediction, because I will be posted soon to a very challenging post. And he asked me, we were speaking in Spanish, he said, ¿A dónde vas? Y le digo, I'm going to be the Mexican ambassador to the US. And he just started laughing and said, that is a challenge.
He said, that's a challenge.
So he started laughing and said, well, you will have a huge task. We were talking for a while about immigration, migrants, poverty, equality. And at the end of the conversation, he said, but you also have to pray for me.
Wow.
We all need prayers. So
wow.
It was a very moving conversation, which I have photographs of them. And I think it showed that Pope Francis understood quite well the challenge and the relevance of being the Mexican ambassador to the U.S. Because as I've been, on a reflexive mood in the last weeks and talking with colleagues, that they've asked me, how did you manage? How did you foresee? Dan, Mexico has become for the U.S. not a foreign policy issue, but more and more a domestic policy. We are so integrated that, as I said, sometimes my main interlocutor was not the Secretary of State or State Department, but always DHS.
Wow. But let's talk about that, because I think it's, I don't think people, unless you follow Mexico closely, they won't recognize how incredibly important Mexico is to the American economy. Could you just share a couple of facts that you and I both know, but many of the people in this audience will know, but I think just for the record, it's important to share, because I think we can't say this enough. Just some of the things that you and I know about the economic relationship between Mexico and the United States, because it's quite critical to both of our countries. We have a shared future.
It is absolutely critical. It's true that we have a shared future. And I think that in Mexico, we have always acknowledged that the US is key for us, for our development. But sometimes in the US, there isn't that acknowledgement of the importance of Mexico. But we are now either the first or the second trading partner of the US.
Can we just hold on that just for a second, Ambassador? I apologize for interrupting you. You have been, for the first time in 400 years, sometime in the last 2 years, the number one
trading
partner of the United States is Mexico. Not Canada, not China, Mexico.
And so in 2019, our trade reached 614 billion US dollars.
Enormous.
It is enormous, much more than the GDP of many countries. And just to have an idea, we trade $1.2 million per minute. We trade $1.2 million per minute through the 57 ports of entry by land. We trade 80%, all the trade takes place through land ports of entry, others through sea ports of entry or air. And Mexico is the first or second market for 26 states for exports. And our main partner in this data is Texas. We trade with Texas $216 billion a year, which is really amazing. It's almost $800 million a day. Mm-hmm. And then our second partner is California, with a trade of almost 80 billion, 79 billion. Our third trade partner is Michigan. We trade with Michigan 69 billion US dollars, almost 70.
Michigan
for the automotive
sector. Is Michigan. So I'd have guessed Texas and California, but if you put a gun to my head and say, what's the third? I'd have said Arizona or Florida. Michigan.
We are more important for Arizona's economy than for Michigan, but in the global is Michigan. And just for you to understand, the trade of Mexico with Michigan is similar to the trade of the US with Brazil.
Oh my gosh!
So Mexico trades with the US an enormous amount, but it's not only the trade, it's the investment, it's the integration of the value chains. Companies as Boeing have more than 56, 60 suppliers in 26 states of Mexico. The other day, Chris Landau was saying that a company identified, I don't remember which company, US company was, identified that they had 200 suppliers in Mexico.
Wow.
So if Mexico's value chain collapses, the US economy collapses. If the US value chain collapses, Mexico economies will almost disappear. And this is also with Canada. And don't think many Americans realize the importance of Mexico
As a
from the point of view
think
of
about
economy.
North America, not just the United States, when we think about our economy.
Because I don't think you can speak now about Mexico's economy or US economy or Canada's economy without realizing that they cannot be autarkic or independent. They are totally integrated. So is the North American economy.
I just want to hammer home 2 other points. There are a number of important Mexican companies that have invested in the United States. Could you just tell 1 or 2 stories about that? Because I don't think we think in those terms either.
Yes, I think the Mexican companies have invested recently in the US more than 30 billion US dollars, and they give a lot of employment. I would mention several of them that are very well known and some of them that are not so well known, maybe. Well, among the most well known, I would say, is Gruma, which most of Americans will know or identify by the name of Mission Foods.
Oh, yeah.
It's the largest producer of corn flour in the world.
Oh, wow.
It's a global company, and they produce, of course, tortillas, they produce salsas, nachos, everything. It's the largest corn flour producer in the world, so it's key for the agro-food industry. They are based in Dallas, and they have, if my memory doesn't fail me, more than 25 factories around the US.
But it's a Mexican company, and they have their
Mexican
US
company.
operations are in Dallas.
Yes, the US operations are in Dallas. Of course, they are based in Monterrey, in Mexico. They are in Turkey. They are in Egypt. They are all around the world.
So they're the Saudi Arabia of corn flour.
You can call them that.
Más o menos.
Más o menos.
Más o menos. How about, tell me another example, give me another example of a Mexican company investing in the United States, creating jobs in the US, because again, I think we never hear about this, but there's tons of these. There are lots of examples like this.
Bimbo, the 4th largest confectionery in the world.
Large bread maker.
And they bought about 4 years ago Sara Lee.
So, really?
Yes, Bimbo is the owner of Sara Lee. So Bimbo, it's a huge Mexican company. I think it's the most successful one in Mexico, of course, in bread making. It's also a global company. They have the best logistics that you could imagine. And of course, they have also more than 30 factories in the US. And
they own Twinkies. Are they the ones that own the Twinkies?
I don't think so, because that is Wonder, but I would have to double check. They are famous in Mexico for gancitos.
Right, and they're also famous for the white bread that they do.
Yes. And so basically, they are great, but there are other companies that are smaller. For example, Envases Universales. I'm sure you have never heard of them. They have like 9 plants in the US. And what they do? They manufacture most of the aluminum cans for tuna, for beer, for this. And they are also a successful Mexican company, family owned, not stock listed. So we can talk a lot about this, and of course you have some investments of the great TV networks in Mexico, and but another thing is that we are having more and more also small and medium businessmen, Mexican businessmen that are established, and businesswomen, of course, that are establishing themselves here. And one of the areas of opportunity that we have for the future is this interaction of the Mexican businessmen and businesswomen, business persons, with the Mexican, American, and Hispanic business persons to tackle specifically the very special Hispanic market, which has several different tastes, maybe, in food, but also in clothing, in music, in cultural industries, producing together, series in Spanish. And this is something that I want to announce that just yesterday we signed an agreement with Argos Media. Argos Media is a Mexican company that is led by Epigmenio Ibarra, a great TV producer, to start. First, we will make a call for young Mexican Americans to write scripts for series to be produced about the Mexican American community, about migration, and be produced with the Mexican Argos and this. And I think this is something that we're just seeing the beginning of a new era of interaction, because what we are seeing in the last years in the US is the total transformation and empowerment of the Hispanic community. And in that Hispanic community, the Mexican American community, the Mexican community is the largest.
Ambassador, let me just push a little bit further. I want to come back to the changing demography, and because I think it's really important. Let me just push on one other thing. I understand that Mexico makes more cars today than Japan. Is that true?
Yes.
I think that it's a very large. Is it true that Mexico is a very large auto manufacturer?
Yes, we are one of the largest auto manufacturers in Mexico.
Mexico is like one of the largest manufacturers in the world of cars, right? Isn't that true?
We are. If my memory doesn't fail me, we must be like the sixth or fourth, between the fourth and the sixth largest manufacturer and exporter of cars. But I wouldn't say, and this is something that I want to underline, I wouldn't say that Mexico manufactures cars. I would say there are North American cars.
Thank you. Yes, that the whole manufacturing supply chain is a North American supply chain.
It's a North American supply chain.
Critical component of this North American supply chain of auto manufacturing is in Mexico, similar to aviation that you were talking about earlier, or sort of these other supply chains.
One piece of a car sometimes crosses the border 7 times.
Oh my word!
Before the car is finally assembled, either in Mexico or in Canada, in the US. And if you go into in-depth analysis, for example, of Toyota strategies or General Motors and this, they have their final assembly lines of certain models in Mexico, but of other certain models in Canada and of other certain models in the US. So to speak about the US auto industry, the Mexican auto industry or the Canadian auto industry is not, it doesn't reflect the reality. You have to speak about the North American auto industry. And when we speak about the North American auto industry, we not only speak about the big 3 Americans, General Motors and Ford and Chrysler now with all the names, but we also are a platform for global production of other cars. Toyota, Subaru, Kia, Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, Volkswagen. They are all present in the North American region. And so we have to speak about the North American auto industry and how integrated we are and how we are a platform for export, not only for the North American market, but for Latin America, for Asia, for Africa. So if we really want to underline what is the future of the North American region, we have to study the integration of the auto industry, and we have to work for the competitiveness of North America.
I think this is a very important point. Thank you. So related to that, we just had, maybe you could argue it's an update to NAFTA, but there was USMCA. And one of the reasons I said earlier that you've had a very successful mission here in the United States, Ambassador, is that USMCA got done on your watch. And people like our friend, Kim Breyer, who was a senior advisor at CSIS, played a key role in this, and loves Mexico, one of Mexico's greatest friends. And I know there are folks on the outside, people like my friend, Ambassador Tony Wayne, who's a former U.S. ambassador to Mexico, played a key role and is also senior advisor here at CSIS. So ambassadors, could you just talk a minute about USMCA? And it's gotten done. There's still some kind of loose ends to work out in terms of implementation, But could you talk a little bit more about your hopes about this trade and what you think the opportunities are within North America? I'd welcome that, given the context of USMCA.
Yes, I think USMCA, as you well underlined, Dan, was not a done deal since the beginning. It took a lot of effort. And USMCA is not only a free trade agreement, it's an investment agreement, because in certain areas like the automotive, it tightens the rules of origin. So, and the tightening of the rules of origin was designed to attract more foreign investment to the North American region. That means that if you want to sell in the North American region, you have to produce cars or vehicles that comply with these new rules of origin that ask you to have a higher regional content. It is, technically speaking, it's long to explain, but it implies to have these very high level of content on core parts of a vehicle, but also on having certain kind of steel and aluminum, etc. But also, USMCA, it's a new template, as Speaker Pelosi said, in a way. It's a new template for the trade agreements that we will see in the future. That means that includes labor specifications, labor rights, bless you, salud. It includes environmental standards, and it includes a branch of new chapters that were not included in NAFTA, like digital trade, like mechanisms to incorporate to the value chains small and medium enterprises, like how to take into account the opinion of indigenous communities, gender issues, cultural industries. So I think we are, the three countries, we are learning, and we will enter a new stage now with the new USTR, Catherine Tai, which, by the way, was very much involved in all the ratification process of USMCA, so she knows USMCA by heart. We will enter this new stage of implementation, of finishing with all the establishment of the committees and processes that are contemplated in USMCA, and to show to the world that these kind of new templates for trade can be the model and that we can progress. And it is our responsibility of the U.S., Mexico, and Canada to prove that this is a way of going forward. And different estimates from different, companies or people who concentrate on analysis, on trade analysis, we think that trade can grow quite a lot. And then we have a huge challenge, which is to improve our infrastructure and logistics, both in Canada, US border, and Mexico, US border. But we can go on talking on that, on how are we going to bring more investment from other regions to the North American region.
To be continued, ambassadors. Let me just press on this, though, because there's a little bit of secreto al voces that, maybe it's not so secreto al voces. There's a common perception among some in the American business community that President AMLO is not seen as pro-business.
Yes.
And there's a hope that the Biden-Harris administration, along with the business community, both in Mexico and the United States, maybe in all of North America, will convince President AMLO's government to move in a more pro-business direction. Could you just react to that perception? What's your reaction to that?
I think that it's not a very accurate perception. I think that the perception that President López Obrador is not open to or not favorable to the private sector is not, it doesn't exactly portray what he thinks. And because most of the criticism have been concentrated on the decisions or the position on energy issues. And you have to remember that our energy systems in Mexico and in the US have been different for many, many, many years. So the US energy sector was always private. the Mexican sector after expropriation in 1938 was a national sector, energy sector, and then the electricity in 1954 or a little bit later. So then we slowly started to open up to more private business participation in the energy sector, which was totally closed. In that opening up to the private sector, I think we did many things right, and some others maybe not so right. And I say this because I was the Mexican ambassador to Norway when the last energy reform was adopted in Mexico, which was basically based on the Norwegian model. And I say basically because we did not follow the Norwegian model in key issues that would have made it more efficient. So we open up slowly to the private sector. And in that opening up, some decisions were taken very fast, and we didn't have sometimes the orderly development that we wanted. What President López Obrador wants is to bring back some order to the energy sector so that both Pemex and the CFE are viable companies for the future.
Sorry, just tell folks what CFE is, sorry.
Sorry?
CFE.
CFE. So I think the main question here in CFE is that it seems that we have an imbalance of how much electricity we produce with the distribution grid. So sometimes Mexico as a whole, with both public and private, we can produce a lot of electricity from different sources, but we don't have sometimes the distribution grid that we need to properly distribute that energy throughout the country. So, and in that processes, the perception in Mexico of CFE is that the hydroelectric plants of CFE that are basically concentrated in the southern part of Mexico were not used at full capacity, because if they were used at full capacity, then there will be an excess of electricity coming from the hydropower plus the wind power in the Oaxaca region, which is the largest wind power area of Mexico. And this, so what they are trying to do is to give priority to the hydropower plants. I think that this law initiative that President López Obrador has just submitted to Congress, it will be broadly discussed. That has been announced, and that I hope that in that discussion and debate, we will find some maybe points of contact and an agreement for the future. Having said that in the energy sector, we have differences, and we need to explain better what is the position of President López Obrador's government. I would say that in other areas, Mexico is totally open for private investment. I was just yesterday with 3M, and they were telling me the expansion that they are having in Ciudad Juárez for export. They tripled their capacity to produce N95 respirators in Mexico, from 700,000 to almost 2 million in the last year. So, I mean, other private sector investments are thriving in Mexico. So we should not confuse the differences and discussions that we are having on the energy sector with a general position of the Mexican government against the private sector, or because that's not true. We are open for private investment, for private sector, and it's true that we have different perceptions or approaches on the energy sector.
So, Ambassador, let me add something else I've noticed. There's a term in the American media called Trump derangement syndrome, which is, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I think there's a form of AMLO derangement syndrome among many of my elite friends in Mexico. Hablan pestes de President AMLO. They have this almost irrational reaction to President AMLO. My view is he's the president of Mexico for the next 4 years. Could you just, I don't want to ask you to psychologically explain that, but could you just, I've sensed that across every time I have it's striking to me, the negative animus. Would you be willing to react to that?
Yes, it's also striking to me because, when I arrived here also, a lot of people told me, oh, the communication with the Trump administration would be impossible, very difficult. And well, we had differences, but it was not impossible and it was not difficult. We had people at the State Department, as Kim Breyer that you quoted, who helped us a lot. Jared Kushner at the White House, the National Security Council at the White House in general. And we disagree many times with DHS. I could tell anecdotes about my almost monthly meetings with Kirsten Nielsen and Kevin McAleenan, and they would make fun of me because the other day one of my friends in DHS saying they knew that when I sit and I said, well, let me explain to you, that is, they said, oh, here comes the Mexican ambassador to tell us that we are wrong in many issues. But the communication was possible. And I think it's the same with President López Obrador. I've known President López Obrador for years, and I know that he listens. And I know that you can talk to him, you can explain to him. It's just that maybe there has been a lack of proper channels of communication at different levels of the government and interaction. And one of these challenges is because in certain areas, there is a misunderstanding of how important it is to talk to the private sector and to engage to the private sector. Because some of the officials in Mexico, they have never been officials before, and they are afraid that if they engage in a conversation with the private sector, they would be accused of yielding to the interest of the private sector and not acting from the public benefit point of view. So I think it has to be understood by both sides that when you engage in a conversation, in a dialogue regarding certain issues that can be delicate, neither the private sector can expect that the officials will change their mentality or their mind of the point of view just because the private sector asks. And the the public sector, the officials would have to understand that engaging with the private sector doesn't mean that they are being corrupt or yielding to their interests, but that they have to find points in common. Maybe we will need a little bit of diplomacy inside Mexico for that.
Well, I think CSIS is available to be a track 1.5 ambassador for something along those lines. We would love to help the Mexican government and the North American private sector engage. And so that's something that's in the back of my mind. And so I think someone needs to play that role, and we're available for that, ambassador.
Oh, we have to think on that, because I would assume that it's very important to dismiss the misconceptions about the Mexican government and President López Obrador position towards private investment, which is open.
So, Ambassador, we're 40 minutes in, and I haven't talked about migration yet. And I know it's a sensitive topic, but I would just say I worry that a migration crisis at our border between Mexico and the United States is going to swamp out or crowd out other important issues. We've just had a very fruitful discussion about this. So many other important issues we have in our relationship as part of a North American economy, but this is going to swamp our relations. And of course, Ambassador, I don't have to tell you this, that most of the folks crossing the border are not from Mexico. They're from Central America in a lot of instances, or from other places. Mexico has net migration, Ambassador. You know this, and I know this. Since 2005, there have been more Mexicans going back to Mexico than Mexicans coming to the United States. And one of the reasons, you know this, Ambassador, is when a country hits $8,000 per capita, which Mexico did in 2005, because it reformed its economy over decades and opened its economy and is now an industrial global industrial player, as you've described, people don't want to migrate. When you hit $8,000 per capita, people want to stay where they are. And Mexico's well beyond $8,000 per capita. It's a member of the OECD, the club of wealthy market democracies. So having said all that, how do we what the heck are we going to do if there's a border crisis? And how do we jointly manage the issue of migration together?
First, I don't think there will be a border crisis. I think it could be if we don't take the appropriate measures on time. And why could be a border crisis? Because we see a situation in Central America that needs to be addressed urgently. There are two tracks or two different aspects in Central America now. The traditional problems that we also share with with some of our Central American brothers, which is the lack of opportunities for young people, that they become prey of organized crime or they have to migrate. So we have to enhance the level of opportunities. And this is a long-term view of addressing the root causes of migration through investment. Private sector investment, but also public sector in logistics, in education, in this. But this is long-term. But we have a more urgent mid and short-term crisis, which is a result of the two hurricanes of last year. And if in Central America, you already had a crisis of lack of opportunities, of continuous drought, you remember the concept, the dry corridor of Central America. 60% of the migrants from Honduras came from the rural area because they lost their coffee. So plantations, and then with the hurricanes. So we have to act with a short and medium-term attitude for urgent aid, and not aid just giving away, but using the tools that are already there. For example, do you know that the most successful cash-based transfer system run by the WFP, it's in Honduras? They run the cash-based transfer system.
I didn't know that.
So it's as simple as the US saying, part of the money that I allocate to the WFP or an extra little money to WFP has to be channeled or to the cash-based transfer system in Honduras so that people stay in Honduras and they rebuild their communities. This is the kind of urgent assistance that we have to work together. And then, of course, we have to find the way of dealing humanely with the families that are migrating. And I think that the idea of giving a great importance to family reunification in the migratory system would be key. Because what you have to open is also legal paths for people to come to the US. And one legal path that has been very successful with Mexico and can be with Central Americans is H-2A visas for agriculture, is to increase maybe the ceiling of H-2B visas. The ceiling of H-2B visas is very low, it's almost like 70,000 a year. And you see industries like the crab industry in Maryland almost going bankrupt because they are H-2B, they cannot use H-2A visas, and they do not have workers. So there are certain tweaks that can be done in the short and medium term that will diminish the pressure very much. Family reunification, H-2EA visas, elevating, increasing the cap for H-2B visas, and emergency aid in programs that are already there, that you are not going to create programs, but use what you have there. And then that will help you to control the short and medium-term pressure until your long-term attitude of addressing the root causes of migration, in which it's an area of total coincidence between President López Obrador and the Biden-Harris administration. They are totally convergent on that priority.
Let me just put something on the table. I put out an article a couple of years ago saying we ought to repurpose the North American Development Bank, which was set up after NAFTA, to broaden its remit to include the Mexican southern border and perhaps the three countries of the Northern Triangle. I'm not asking you for official policy on that, but what's your reaction to that, Ambassador Bárcena?
I think we studied it during the negotiations of USMCA. And we thought that it was necessary to repurpose the NatBank. It is easier said than done because you have to change the charter that gave origin to NatBank.
Well,
That's
maybe
one thing.
Something we can work on together when you retire.
And this is not easy. Second is the border communities, when they listen to this, they were very worried because, and they are right, because they say we have so many needs to comply with the current purpose of NatBank on, water sanitation, logistics, that we would need to increase then the resources of the NatBank almost by 3 or 4 times to be able to cover the needs of the border, the northern border of Mexico, the southern border of the US, and to go to
out of area.
Okay. But I would be even done more audacious than you are. I think more than a NatBank for the borders, we would need to think of a bank that takes care of the poorest regions in the 3 countries of North America, in a way similar to the stabilization funds of the European Union. Because it's true that there is a need of huge investment in certain areas of Canada and the US and in areas of Mexico. And maybe if you analyze not nationally, but regionally and locally, you will find some similarities in certain areas. But this is a dream for the next 10, 15 years. Well, but it will level the playing field, I think that's for everyone.
So, Ambassador, I want to make sure I get there's some very interesting questions that have been sent to us. One is about, there's a woman from Amnesty International has asked about, how did you apply a gender perspective in your time as ambassador? My understanding is, and this is my words, not hers, Mexico has a feminist foreign policy. So could you just talk a little, what's that, and how you're female and you're ambassador. So talk a little bit about feminist foreign policy and what's it like having been the first Mexican ambassador who happened to be a woman.
Yes, I think I applied the gender perspective in a very practical ways. One of the practical ways is I look at the heads of section at the embassy and see, well, we have more men than women. Let's see if we can promote some of the women so that we have a more balanced, a more balanced X-ray of the heads of section at the embassy. Second, I will ask, for example, my Congress section to particularly concentrate on getting me interviews with women senators and with congresswomen so that I could engage with them. Because of COVID came, we couldn't do something that I was talking with Debbie Dingell particularly, which was to get together the women ambassadors in Washington with the congresswomen and to see if we could find points of coincidence, and also the congresswomen with Mexico specifically, and see which areas we could advance. So I established a very good relationship, I would say, with several congresswomen that are really close to my heart now, like Veronica Escobar, like Zoe Lofgren, like Rosa de Lauro. I like her so much. And Debbie Dingell. And I don't know, that was a very practical way of doing it. And with Senator Cortez Masto, Senator Kirsten Sinema, with the former Senator Martha Bárcena. And that was Johnny Ernst. I really enjoy Claire McCaskill, I really enjoy my conversations with the women politicians because they were always very constructive. They were always very constructive, and that was another area that I worked very hard. Then we were also working the issue basically with a network of consulates in the US and my consulate in Washington of domestic violence. And I made a specific point of engaging on this issue with the women leaders of the Mexican community in the region of Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia. And because with COVID, domestic violence went up. And this is something that really worries us. And we were working with the foreign ministry and the network of consulates and these to focus on these matters. And when I went to visit some of my consulates, of the consulates of Mexico, that unfortunately because of COVID, I could not visit them all. One of my priorities was to meet with the leaders of the Mexican community and particularly with female leaders or young female leaders. If you see the agenda of my trips, I always met with them, I listened to them, and domestic violence was one issue. The second was, it was something very psychological. Say, how do we educate our children to make them proud of their Mexican origin and to make them proud to be immigrants and not be despised for being immigrants or for not mastering English since the beginning. So we worked a lot on encouraging to be bilingual, on success stories for children. So say, this is a success migrant, this is a successful Mexican. That issue, which is very psychological, hurts the mothers very much. They say, how do I make sure that my son or my daughter are not ashamed of being migrants or Mexicans, that they are proud of being migrants and Mexicans? And that is why I've been saying during the whole of my tenure here that Mexicans have been the past, are the present, and are the future of the US.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ambassador. That's amazing. I have another question from the chat. I'm going to use my words. This is about, there's a perception in Mexico that President AMLO was close to President Trump. Is this a challenge for President AMLO having a good relationship with President Biden?
I wouldn't think it's a challenge. I think, yes, President AMLO managed to build a good relationship with President Trump. President Trump respected President AMLO very much. He thought that AMLO was a strong leader and that he respected strong leaders. And I think President AMLO understood the psychology of President Trump well, and they interacted well. My personal opinion, and I've been talking about this with my president a couple of times, is that that he and President Biden shared many common issues. You know, both reached the presidency after several attempts and a long political career. And they are both committed to issues that are dear to them, like addressing inequality, like addressing discrimination, like giving opportunities and taking care of the most vulnerable. I think President Biden knows Mexico better than many other presidents of the US before. And I am certain that when in due time, the pandemics and everything allows it, if President Biden goes to Mexico and either to the border in which we have common challenges or to see the south and southeast of Mexico, Tabasco, Chiapas, and see how we can push from the development of the southeast of Mexico, we can pull the whole Central America with us he will understand much more about Mexico, and he will engage with President López Obrador. So I am optimistic, and I don't think that the good relationship that President López Obrador managed to have with President Trump will be an obstacle to a good relationship of President AMLO with President Biden. On the contrary, it shows that President López Obrador, particularly on person-to-person basis, can be very engaging, very empathic, and really it's a pleasure to talk with him on one-on-one.
So another question that's come up very interesting is about, there's been a recent Asia-wide trade agreement, unfortunately, Pacific trade agreement, unfortunately, is sort of a follow-on to TPP. The United States, under the Trump administration, pulled out of the TPP. So a China-led Asian Pacific agreement called RCEP was put together, and instead, what does that mean for Mexico?
I think I wouldn't think of the latest agreement as put instead of CPTPP. That agreement is still there. We are following very closely all the statements that the Biden administration have been saying about CPTPP, saying that they would consider to rejoin if some changes are done to it. We don't know what changes. So maybe Catherine Tai in the future will define that. But we don't see necessarily as something that erased by itself the new agreement, the CPTPP. And I think they could be complementary. And I think that the U.S. government will send us more clear signals in the near future on how are they going to approach their economic relationship with Asia in general and with China in particular. Meanwhile, Mexico continues to be part of the CPTPP, and we continue to work very hard with them and with the Pacific Alliance. You remember with our colleagues, countries from Peru, Colombia, Chile, and we are progressing on that. But on the trade arena, Dan, we have a huge agenda in the future. U.S. CAFTA, how do we, manage to not integrate, but harmonize CAFTA with the new USMCA? How do we harmonize our work with the Pacific Alliance with the requisites of USMCA? How do we deal with CPTPP? How the other agreement is going to work? We are also in the processing of going through the ratification process of the new agreement of Mexico with the European Union that will also have a huge impact on the automotive sector.
Well, look, I've got my last question for you, Ambassador, is we have an incoming Mexican ambassador to the United States.
Yes.
At some point, the United States will name a new ambassador to Mexico. So could you just give a little bit of advice to both of those new people? I believe we know who the new Mexican ambassador is that's incoming. We don't know who the next U.S. ambassador is to Mexico. So could you just in generic terms, some parting thoughts you have for both of those two people?
Well, I'm in touch with the incoming ambassador almost on a daily basis. I know him since we were very young. We were like 15 and 17, so we know each other well. He's a very professional and talented politician. And so I've been providing him with all the information that he requested and more. And my main advice to him would be engage, engage, engage. Don't sit only at the desk and read and engage with people, engage with Congress, engage with think tanks, engage with the community. That is key to understand and to learn better how to process the different challenges that you will have ahead, and particularly when there is a new Congress. And this, I know that in COVID-19 times that is difficult, but you have to do it. And engage with all the different departments of the US government, engage with governors, engage with mayors. You have this network of 50 consulates that can help you. So my main advice would be engage, engage, engage. But to engage, you have to be well prepared. You cannot arrive to a meeting just saying platitudes, because it will not get you there. So you have to master the issues in which you are going to discuss with each one of your interlocutors, because that shows respect, and then that shows that you can advance an agenda. So master the issues and engage. And to a former future, or I mean, not a former, but to a future U.S. ambassador to Mexico, of course, also engage is very important. Engagement is always important, mastering the issues. But I would say be very attentive to Mexican sensibility and sensitivity, particularly on what we think are the limits for non-intervention. So try not to speak publicly about internal politics in Mexico. Try to be very careful, try to be constructive, not confrontational, and that will help. Maybe I'm too naive, but I think that will help. And to both ambassadors, I will say, as soon as COVID allows you, travel through the country, not being a Mexico City ambassador, not being a Washington ambassador, but being the ambassador of Mexico to the US and the ambassador of the US to Mexico.
Ambassador, thank you so much. Congratulations on your service. As I said, it's not goodbye. It's see you next week. I look forward to a fluid and ongoing dialogue with you. CSIS is so grateful for your partnership, and I want to just thank you for your public service. And we are grateful for your friendship and your collegiality that you've shown us. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Dan. The one that is thankful is me. I think you already identified like 3 or 4 issues that we can work on the future. And I just want to take the opportunity of this dialogue and this platform to thank from the bottom of my heart to all the friends of Mexico, to all the people that it's engaged in the U.S. Mexico relationship, in the North American relationship. At the end, we ambassadors come and go, but it is you that have been working for years in the bilateral relationship. It's the Mexicans that live here that are the real ambassadors of both countries. And so thank you, and continue that good work.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'll be in touch, and thanks, and stay healthy in the meantime. And congratulations on the birth of your second grandchild.
I am delighted. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.